So I hope you all have enjoyed the day. It's been super fun as usual, and I think we're all very happy that it worked out without any hitch, except for the coffee during lunch, maybe. So we will be sending out a form for giving us feedback on the conference. So constructive feedback is very much appreciated. And tell us how we can improve this for next year. So as usual, we end the conference with me giving some reflections on the state of the AI community in Gothenburg and the conference in general. And this year I will focus on language, of course. And I just put it here, not to be pretentious, I hope, but actually, so Magnus mentioned in the morning language games. And that was actually a phrase that was sort of popularized by Wittgenstein. He was an analytical philosopher. And he was part of this movement that discovered that a lot of existential questions are actually boiling down to language and understanding language and how humans communicate. So he said, this is actually a quote, "The limits of my language are the limits of my world." And sort of with the recent discovery, it seems almost prescient in some sense. Like, maybe language is enough, and maybe he was right about that. So I just had to put this on there. I think it's worth a reflection. And read his, his books are super hard, but at least we can try. I think it was, very much before his time, given recent developments. So let's see. So last year, I looked at my slides last year, and I had this point that the pioneers, I was mentioning like Google and the big companies in the US and so on, they can inspire us and show us what the future might look like, but it does not belong to them. I think that was the main point, because we see that the democratization, open sourcing and everything of models is really enabling everybody to build their own solutions. I think Kaisa also showed this right now in the last talk before we're ending. But I think we're all wondering, has this changed now? Is this actually true? Is it possible for people in Gothenburg and so on to build models that are competitive and useful in the sense that what we're seeing coming out from OpenAI and so on? So I think we have some reflections here about that. That's has this actually changed? I think we're all worried about this. So we'll do this by doing some reflections over what has happened over these years since we started this conference in 2018. A lot has changed, but apparently not that much, actually. Because in 2018, we were 400 people at Lindholmen Conference Center, that Jacob mentioned before. And during that conference, we had Mikael Kågebäck, who is also here in the audience. He talked about, in the talk that was related to something else in general, deep reinforcement learning for inventing languages or something like that. But he actually talked about success stories in NLP, of the appearance of language models and the consequences of how they are helping us with machine translation and so on. So, I mean, it could have said that this year. So we're basically on top of things already 2018. In 2019, Aron Lagerberg, who's also here, he had a talk about a language model is all you need. And that is also a little bit like staying on top of things, because that's perhaps what we're seeing right now, to a large extent in many different areas and so on, introducing like transformers and how we can use them and how they use them at SEAL at that point. So even if 2019 is, of course, ages ago, I mean, not a lot has changed. And this was 450 people, I think, if I remember it, people at Lindholmen Conference Center again. So in 2020, we had a digital conference because of Corona. So I don't know how many people actually watched it, but I think we had a couple of thousand viewers. And 2020, Olof was talking about how the language models actually had the ImageNet moment. And because at that point of time, computer vision was in some sense ahead of language. But when transformers came, the NLP had this ImageNet moment that also Magnus was talking about in the morning. And Olof Mogren, who is now at RISE, don't think he's here today, talking about how we can analyze bias and problems with these models and see like what gender biases and so on they have, very much on top of things as well. And then we had the gap in 2021 because we were all very tired of Corona, as I think most of you are. So the fourth one was last year. And the keynote last year was also very much on top of things. With Olle Häggström, talked about AI alignment. And he was wondering, sort of on stage last year, when transformative AI will happen. And maybe it has now, only 1 year later. We don't know. Probably not. Probably not. But I mean, recent discussions are definitely already pointing this question. So he was definitely on top of things. So given that actually this community has been all through these 5 years on top of all these developments, and we have been discussing and talking about them, maybe this is still true. Because we in this room, or we in the conference and everything we do, we're definitely talking about everything that is relevant. So, I think, Magnus this morning, he mentioned GPT-3 as the first steps towards a Nordic AGI. So I was thinking, like, how many years are we after the sort of main contributors here? And the first car was built in 1886, and it took 11 years for Sweden to build its own car in some sense. The first Swedish car was built in 97, so that's 11 years later. And GPT-3 was released in 2020, and GPT-3 was released in 2023. So the gap is getting smaller in the sense that it only took 3 years now to build Sweden's own first car, or AGI, or getting closer to that. So, I mean, I have 2 points, and I have extrapolated, so it looks good. And the other point here is it's a joint effort, and I think Francesca was talking about that from the perspective of gathering all the experts in the community in order to build a great data set. And I think OpenAI is around 600 people, at least now. I mean, I couldn't find really good numbers on the net, but around 600. We have been 650 here today with a lot of knowledge. So probably we don't have people here that have built like flash attention in CUDA or optimized like batch size training over 20,000 computer clusters and so on. But I mean, I'm sure we can do that if we just combine our expertise. Doesn't sound too complicated. It took maybe $4 million to train Llama, which is this half-open model from OpenAI. I think they trained it on a month on some 2,000 A100s. So it sounds like a lot of money, just to train a model, of course. But if we compare it with some classic Gothenburg example, so Volvo Cars is actually making $4 million every hour. At least they did that in 2022. So, I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's also not that lot. So, if we're thinking about the difference now, okay, we're all seeing that OpenAI is doing this and that and so on, but if we're actually looking at what we are doing here and compare that sort of in more detail, I mean, the gap is not that big. I think I've convinced myself of that. Right. GAIA has always been about the community, and we have a great community here, and we should embrace the change that is going on right now and believe that we can be on top of it, as we have been over the last 5 years. So, that was the hopefully optimistic message I have. And now I want to get all the organizers on stage so we can thank all the fantastic people that has made this conference possible. So please, guys. So, I forgot to do this last year, so now we're going to do an extra big applause for 2 years of celebration of this fantastic team that has made this conference possible, working overtime and on their own, on their own initiative. So.